Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Raven here, back at it again with some more Arma 3 tutorial shit. This video here is going to be about the main modules for Alive and the military and civilian placement modules. So I'm following the same platform as the 2020 Alive tutorial series. However, I'm going to condense some of the um, videos down into one instead of having like 6 different videos. So, like in the overview, the modules that you're going to need for the main modules is the virtual AI system, Alive required, obviously. Data, if you want to save. This isn't really necessary, but you're also going to need the military AI commander, the mil objective, civ objective, logistics, IED threat. No, that's not really needed. And close quarter battle, as well as the AI skill. And then for the alive civilian placement, you're going to need civilian placement and civilian population. So let's jump right into the virtual AI system real quick, or actually we'll start with the alive required. So alive required is simple enough. This is the main bread and butter of what Alive needs to operate. So, like in the overview video, you have multiple options here. You can either have it kick players, or you can warn them, telling them that they're out of the current version of Alive. AI distribution, you can either choose server or headless clients. I use server, and then I also use headless clients through TADST. So that helps offset um, the taxation, if you will, onto the server of the AI distribution. Um, for disable single player save, I have this set to yes, mainly because I don't want individuals saving. We save after every mission at the end. Advanced markers. I'm pretty sure if you see my operational videos, the markers that are persistent across multiple saves. So with the advanced markers, you can provide spot reps. You can provide enemy composition with said spot reps. Or you could just place a marker down, and that marker will stay on the map until you end the mission file. Admin actions, I leave this on. That way I can change stuff on the fly for the most part, such as the military IED threat, or the IED threats module stuff, so you can up the what are they called? Suicide bombers and the IED threat, so on and so forth. So you can do that with the admin action. So I leave all of these to no. The auto pause, if you don't want the AI to continue maneuvering after everybody leaves the server, you're going to want to turn this to yes. However, for that dynamic feel, I leave this set to no as well. That way AI can continue to move even after there's nobody on the server. Like I said in the overview, I don't really touch the garbage collectors, because between this and the Bohemia garbage collector, it'll do its thing and make everything work the way it's supposed to. For clutter types, I just leave this empty. And then for the Alive tablet model, you can use tablet or you can use map bag. Doesn't really matter. And then for module info, like it says down here, you don't need to sync anything to it. So onto the virtual AI system. Like I keep saying in the overview, persistence, depending on what you want to do, I leave persistence on. The other options you have is yes or no. So it's pretty simple, self-explanatory. Synchronization. So you have two options here. Only virtualize synced units and virtualize all editor placed units. So say for instance, you have a few entities that you want to be on the map, and you place them in via the editor, you would choose option B. However, I keep everything virtualized, so that's my personal 2 cents on it. Spawn radius. Spawn radius is where you set the spawn radius to spawn the AI. So if you say are playing on Kadal, I don't know if Kadal's indexed yet, but we'll say you're playing on Kadal. Kadal is 60 kilometers by 60 kilometers, which is huge. So you could up this to like 3,500 meters, and this distance is in meters. So on this map, because this map is small, it's only about like 10 or so kilometers. Yeah, it's like 10.5. I downsize based off of the size of the map. So for a map that's 20 kilometers, I'll set it to 2,500 or 3,000 meters. However, terrain dependent, I will downsize it. That way, stuff isn't spawning immediately as soon as you spawn in. Heli radius, if you don't want helicopters spawning in AI, you can set the helicopter spawn radius to 0. That way, there's no spawns from a helicopter. I have it set to 500. That way, when a helicopter is flying across the map, it'll spawn stuff that they can see. Planes, due to the elevation that planes typically loiter at, I have it disabled. Same with UAVs. UAVs typically goes off of the infantry spawn radius anyway, so I just set it to 0 to disable it. Activity or active limiter. This all depends on what you're trying to do. The default value that it starts out at is just 144. I downsize that a lot. That way there's not a lot of AI that are being plopped onto the server and subsequently bogging stuff down and people getting low frame rates, etc. It all depends on what you're trying to do. So the numbers that I typically set are between 30 and 100. Just depends on map size. Virtual combat speed. I set this to none because it, like it says, it alters how fast virtual AI move across the map. So if you want to move in at a realistic pace, set it to none. If you want to move fast, you have the option of 125%. However, it's entirely your prerogative. Virtual combat speed, I just leave this on regular. Pathfinding and infantry sea transport, both experimental, so I don't touch that. Smooth spawn, I also don't touch this. Data, if you're going to use the Alive War Room, this is the module for you. If you're not, don't really worry about it. But to touch on it, if you're going to use the Alive War Room, you're going to want to set to Cloud, save mission time, save roadblocks outpost. This is up to you. The chat kill feed, I don't really leave it on. Disable stats, have that set to no. That way it'll record player stats to the war room. Disable AAR, also set to no. And then all of this depends on personal prerogative down here, the performance monitor and the operating system performance statistics. What's the next one? We'll talk about the military AI commander. So this is where you get into your military spawns. So for the control type, you have 3 options. You have invasion, you have occupation, and you have asymmetric. For what we're doing a Middle Eastern Taliban sort of thing, so we use asymmetric. If you're, say, fighting Russians, you can use occupation or invasion. I find the best results are from occupation or asymmetric. For persistence, like you set in the virtual AI system, or not the virtual AI system, the virtual AI system, I set it to yes because persistence, we want persistence. Installations, this is only for asymmetric mode, so you can have IED factories, recruitment HQs, etc. So depending on how many you want, I find medium to be a perfect median between. There's stuff to find, and then, but it's few and far in between. Roadblocks, I don't use them for spawn radius, or not spawn radius, for spawn rates. If you want to keep frame rates high, you can turn it off. The more stuff that spawns onto the map, the longer it's going to take to load in. So, it's entirely up to what you want to do. As I said previously, reinforcements, like it says here, you have 3 options for reinforcements. Constant is at the 90%, packets is at the 75%, and then fucking seldom is at 50%. So I have it set on packets. Intel, I have it set to often. You can have it set to seldom or none. It's entirely up to you if you want AI to carry intel. For factions, I've had a few people actually ask me about the faction stuff. So recently, Alive updated and the Orbat has changed. So, me personally, for these factions, if you're using vanilla, you can use one of these drop downs to pick the factions that you want to spawn. I set it to none and then I override. And then for these faction names, they're found in the basically the class name for a specific faction. So for the Chideki insurgents, basically, it's going to be RHS graph underscore then whatever it is, and then you can see that it goes across, and then with the Alive Orbat creator, you can check to see which factions are Alive compatible and what's not. So for us, we're using a Middle Eastern militia faction, so that's where we would type that. And then the simultaneous attacks and the recruitment size, I don't really touch these. You can change it, but it's entirely up to you. For AI skill, simple enough. You put the same faction that you put as the AI commander in recruit, regular, veteran, or expert. And then you can change the abilities of said faction. Military close quarter battle. Once again, you want to enable persistence. Locality, you have 2 options, or that's not the right one. Locality is automatic, and you can't change it, but type is the 2 that I was talking about, 2 options. You have strategic and you have civilian. So the AI commander will delegate which area is a strategic location, and he will set that as a close quarter battle location, if that makes any sense. I set it to civilian because I use a complete map, so there's more chances of AI to be... sorry about that, had a yawn. There's more chances for AI to spawn within buildings if you use the entire map. Probability, this is where you can change the probability. So I'm actually going to up it on this map to 30%. So 1/3 of the time, practically, there will be people in houses. Density, this is all for static weapons. So I set this to off, that way there's less stuff spawning in. AI amount, I have it set to pair. You can change it to solo, pair, fire team. I just leave it on pair. Static weapons, none, which corresponds to the density. These are the weapon class names that can spawn in. You can change this by using the class name for like a turret, for example, for a Dishka or a 50 cal, etc. Placement, I just leave this as is. It's static or dominant. Spawn ground. This once again corresponds with the spawn radius that you set in the virtual AI system. I don't really worry about the static weapon because I don't use any. And then heli, jet. Heli and jet, I don't use the heli or jet spawns because, we don't want stuff poofing in and decreasing frame rate. For factions, once again, the same faction that you use as a military AI commander and in the AI skill is what you're going to plop here. And then TAORs, we'll talk about that in another video. Briefly covered it in the overview, but the TAORs, whatever you name those markers, is what you're going to place in here. And make sure you separate them with a comma. IED threat, if you're going to use it, TAORs, you can set the bomber class via the individual class names. What the IED threat level, the suicide bomber threat level, the vehicle borne, so on and so forth. I actually had a question about this. So we use EODs, and then the person was asking if the EODs IEDs are pressure plate. It literally all depends, because like you can see with this class name right here, it's a EODs 120 millimeter USSR IED PP. That PP stands for pressure plate. There's also options that are way down this line here that are remote controlled. So there is the possibility of a triggerman spawning in to blow you up from afar, basically. But it, as I said in the overview, everything is hit or miss. You have to play around with it to make it work the way you want to. Logistics, if you're going to use it, make sure you have persistent set to yes if you're using persistent, or the persistent mode. I like to set it to dynamic, that way stuff just doesn't poof into existence. It's like an actual convoy. You can change the force pool. If you're using just straight infantry and stuff, you can just set this to yes. Mechanized, motorized, that's entirely up to you how you want to do it. The bread and butter here is the CIF objective and the MIL objective. So TAORs, once again, the force faction, once again, how many entities you want, or how many groups, I should say. You have options from battalion, which is 1,200, all the way down to 30. I find anywhere between 100 and 800 to be the butter zone. Readiness, I like to set it to 50%, but you can go 100, 75, 25, and 50. It's entirely how you want to do it. If you're going to override, make sure the number equals the number in the force size, or else shit will break. MIL objective, same concept as CIF objective, your TAORs, your blacklist, the force size, the override, the faction that you've been using. Down here at the bottom, do you want to create a HQ or a field HQ? Do you want to place air units, supplies, ambient vehicles, ambient guards? Play around with it and see what works for you. If having stuff set low works for you and having these set to no, it works for you. I have mine set this way because it gives my guys a premise to actually look at stuff and do a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? They pay more attention to detail instead of just, oh, we're going to go here and kill this. And for the civilian goodies, you want to set the TAORs across the entire map, because you're using the entire map. The blacklist is going to be the same as all the other modules that you're using, where you don't want AI to spawn unless you want them to spawn in there. For the size filter, I have it set to ignore small objectives. That way, small objectives are ignored. You can set it to ignore tiny. You can set it to be only huge objectives, only tiny and small, only medium. It's entirely your prerogative. Priority, I don't filter it. Force faction. Placement level, this is for civilian agents, so like priests, sheikhs, etc. Politicians. Then you can change the side of
said agents via the civilian population module. So I have the distance set higher than the AI spawn, the enemy AI spawn. That way, our UAV guy can tell us prior to us going into a town that there's civilians in the area. And it looks like the civilians are out doing their thing, and then the insurgents, go into houses, they pick up weapons, and then they come out. That way it makes stuff a little more dynamic and unpredictable. Heli radius, 0. Plane radius, 0. Active limiter. I find anywhere between 10 and 30 to be the sweet spot. Hostility, you can change it. You can set the op4 hostility high, and then the the civilians will work with you more. I like setting the blue 4 hostility to medium. Alive recently added humanitarian rations and water, so you can interact with the civilian and give them goodies, and then in change he'll give you information on what you want to know, which I think is cool, because it's kind of how it works in real life. You give somebody you give somebody some stuff, and then they'll give you something in return. It's that quid pro quo, and then come to find out, they're actually working with the Taliban. I don't use crowd spawns because they spawn like a buttload of people, and then frame rates drop, and people just get super confused, and they start shooting civilians, and then that drives your hostility up. So I just don't use them. Insurgent faction, I skipped over that, but this is the faction that the civilians will snitch to you on, so they'll be like, oh yeah, these guys are insurgents. This is recently added, so the ASEX humanitarian items, humanitarian aid limit, and the chance of hostility decrease. So say for instance you whack a civilian, they're mad, you give them some goodies. Instead of it being at high or extreme, it goes back to medium. So play with it, see how it works for you, and if you got questions, ask in the comments below. As always, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you didn't and you have questions, like I said, leave them in the comments below. Or you can do what a lot of people have been doing and message me directly in Discord. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I think like 80% of my views are from unsubscribed people. So, yeah, definitely smash that button, because it's totally helps me out. That way I know that you guys want to see more stuff like this. But as always, hope you enjoyed. Make sure you guys leave a like, comment. If you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon. That way you get notified every time I upload. I'll push out another tutorial video next week. Not going to have a operational video this weekend because going places and doing things and stuff. So, yeah. But make sure you guys do all that fancy jazz for me. And hope you learned something. Hope to see you guys in the next one. Cheers. Stop texting me.